Hello and welcome to Taiwan Talks. I'm Kavat. US President-elect Donald Trump continues to announce his cabinet nominations, including several strong China hawks. Taiwan's intelligence chief says the move is to contain China. What impact will the new Trump administration have on US-China relations? And how well will Taiwan work with the next cabinet to ensure peace across the strait? Joining us today are Lailari, retired US Air Force Foreign Area Officer, and Alexander Huang, Council on Strategic Wargaming Studies Chair. A very warm welcome to both of you on the show today.
Thank you.
Today, we'll focus on national security and defense. Trump nominated a few US veterans for his team, including Mike Waltz for White House National Security Advisor, Pete Hegseth for Secretary of Defense, and Tulsi Gabbard for Director of National Intelligence. All cabinet appointees will require confirmation by the Republican-controlled Senate. Before we go into the individual nominations, let's take a look at the pick so far as a whole. Guermantes, if I can start with you, what's the message that Trump, do you think, is sending to China?
I think, first of all, I just mentioned that I was impressed by the fact that he chose his nominees very quickly after getting the election. So the message that he's sending to China is that the U.S. is no longer going to be bullied or pushed around anymore, and he has a very strong team that will manage the relationship between China and the U.S. in a different way than the Biden administration, which was more of an accommodation. But during that accommodation period, the U.S., China stole, spied, and did a lot of things that the U.S. Didn't really react to, including supporting Taiwan.
Alexander, would you agree with that assessment?
Well, generally, yes. I think a little bit more than that. Not only sending signals to China, I think these appointments also have a huge responsibility to overhaul their own organizations. So there are domestic in-house agenda as well. But talking about China, I think so far these names would make Beijing think more than twice about how to deal with the next administration in Washington, D.C.
Guermantes, do you think that China might rethink what it's doing around Taiwan in terms of the pressure, the incursions, and also in the South China Sea?
Yes, I think that they're going to have to recalibrate their behavior with respect to Taiwan and in their so-called illegal claim of the 10-dash line. A lot of the people that President-elect Trump nominated are very supportive of Taiwan and Israel. But I would say that Taiwan is going to have some hard love to deal with in terms of the U.S. administration, because they're going to have high expectation of Taiwan building up its defense, not just in buying weapon systems, but getting the people who are reservists, for example, trained and prepared for war. And that's the best way to stop war, is to be prepared for war.
Okay. Now, Mike Waltz, the White House National Security Advisor appointment, holds the distinction of being the first U.S. Army Special Forces veteran known as Green Beret to serve as a member of Congress. He once served as a Special Mission Command Officer in Afghanistan, the Middle East, and Africa. He was awarded the Bronze Star Medal 4 times and served for 27 years. He is one of the most hawkish members of the U.S. Congress on China. Now, before getting into Waltz's nomination, let's first look at Joe Biden's lifting of the ban on Ukraine using long-range missiles into Russian territory, and Mike Waltz's response to that.
It's another step up the escalation ladder, and nobody knows where this is going. North Korea is unleashing ballistic missiles, artillery, now tens of thousands of soldiers. The administration responds by lifting this restriction. North Korea sends more soldiers.
Guermantes, so what's your reading of the two approaches between Biden and here Waltz, which he's citing Donald Trump in terms of Ukraine?
Well, I think there's a lot of dynamics going on here. First of all, the Biden administration is a lame duck administration, and President Biden is on his way out. And so he and his people feel less constrained about doing things. And the second part of it is that it shows that what Biden's real intention was, and all his hesitancy for the last almost 3 years is kind of ironic, because his administration was the one that prevented a lot of weapons initially going to Ukraine, and now he's gung-ho about it. So he's creating a situation that will make it more difficult for Trump to negotiate with Ukraine and Russia a peaceful resolution to the conflict. That's what I think is going on.
Don't you think it could be read another way, though, that he's essentially trying to give Ukraine that advantage in order to try to gain more before coming to the negotiation table with Russia under Trump?
It's a dangerous gambit, because if that's the intent, then and Russia responds with a threat of using tactical nuclear weapons, and they do it, then what? Then what happens? So, you know, you have to look at each step several steps ahead of time. And so I'm concerned that Putin might actually use tactical nuclear weapons against the Ukrainians. And then what do? We've created a situation where now nuclear weapons are used in the battlefield for the first time since World War II.
Alex, let's get into Waltz and what he offers. So Trump has said in the statement when he announced he was appointing him, Mike has been a strong champion of American first foreign policy agenda and will be a tremendous champion of our pursuit of peace through strength. What is it about Waltz that shows us how Trump is pursuing that?
Well, personally, I like him a lot. We spent more than 30 minutes in his office. And unlike other politicians, you know, asking visitors whether you want to take a photo, I think Mike asked me, what do I want to talk to? So actually, I personally had a pretty good experience in discussion about the security situation around Taiwan, and I could feel that he is a strong supporter of Taiwan.
Right.
And I think in the job as a national security advisor, he would always keep Taiwan security in mind whenever he review any policy options.
All right. Let's go to something that he has said that we can quote on Taiwan. He said, we need to make it very clear to China that invading Taiwan, which will then allow China to control about 50% of global trade and GDP, isn't acceptable. And we need to move away from that policy of strategic ambiguity that we've had for years and make it very clear, because deterrence failed. Guermantes, so he wants to abandon strategic ambiguity, go for strategic clarity. But that contrasts, isn't it, with Trump's own position?
Yes, but, you know, Mike Waltz is an advisor. So just because Mike Waltz says something doesn't mean the president's going to do it. And so Mike Waltz's job is to manage the National Security Council of the United States and provide the president with the best advice. And so by providing him options of, if you do this, if you do that, these are the consequences. I think that's Mike Waltz's position, and so that's very important. And by the way, I agree with him that the U.S. and Taiwan need to restore deterrence, because I believe deterrence has failed, and China understands that. And so it'll take a lot of work on both sides, the U.S. and Taiwan, to restore it. And I think he's also an excellent choice because he's also been the policy advisor for Secretaries of Defense of Donald Rumsfeld and Robert Gates. He's also on the House Armed Services Committee, Intelligence Committee, et cetera. So his experience is vast, and also you mentioned his Green Beret experience. You know, one of the things that they do is their specialty is unconventional warfare, and they train local people to deal with an invader, which is exactly what would happen in Taiwan. So I think he is in the right mindset of how to approach the issue of China and how to help Taiwan.
So you think he's very well placed, essentially, to have this position?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Waltz is also a member of the U.S. House Tiger team on foreign arms sales, and he said about that, let's be clear, deterrence failed in Ukraine. We did not deter Putin from invading his neighbor and leveling whole cities. We can't wait until Taipei, the capital city of Taiwan, is leveled, much like Mariupol is, to then have a tough response. So, Alex, how do you think that China would be reacting to his particular appointment, Mike Waltz, and all the things that he's said previously about Taiwan?
Yeah, I think what Mike Waltz had publicly said is not unique from him. I mean, a lot of people have made the similar argument. I agree with...
but they haven't been in cabinet before.
Yeah, but I think Mike is well qualified. I think he can, based on his experience before and my personal interaction with him, I think he's very qualified for that job. What we need to know in Taiwan is that what's the expectation from Mike? What Taiwan should do that make Mike think that we are serious and we have contributed sufficient efforts, not only money, but efforts to increase our deterrence capability. I think it's very clear. I just returned from Washington, D.C. I think the message has been very clear.
Right. Now, Trump's nominee for Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, was a U.S. veteran who served tours of duty with the National Guard in Iraq and Afghanistan, and he was awarded 2 Bronze Stars. U.S. media reports say he left Fox News feeling the Pentagon had victimized and spurned him. Trump said Pete has spent his entire life as a warrior for the troops and for the country. Pete is tough, smart, and a true believer in America first. With Pete at the helm, America's enemies are on notice. However, Mark Cancian, senior advisor with CSIS, and he's also a retired U.S. Marine Corps colonel and senior advisor, said this.
President Trump likely sees him as a disruptor in an organization that he regards as staid and unresponsive. Hegseth's challenge will be that he has not been in government, therefore does not have a sense of the levers of power. And if the reports are true about some sort of general officer board, some sort of general officer review, he'll be coming into a hostile organization, an organization that is very defensive, and this double challenge will be particularly difficult.
So, Guermantes, there have been some reservations about Pete Hegseth's nomination, more than for Mike Waltz. What's your personal reaction to it?
I think that the entire Trump administration is coming in to renovate the government, the U.S. government, and it's not excluding DOD. And so I think Pete Hegseth has laid out his plan in his book, The War on Warriors, Behind the Betrayal of Men Who Kept Us Free. And he's, for example, the previous speaker mentioned that the generals have been put on notice. In his book, he points out that there are 44 four-star generals or admirals in the U.S. military, with about 2 million, including active and reserve. During World War II, we had 21 million people serving, and we only had 7 four-star generals. So we've had a problem where we keep on creating these positions, and we have too many 4-stars. Israel only has 1 3-star general. So, you know, there's a lot of different things that can be done, and think tanks have also referred to this problem, and he's not the only one who's talking about it. So I think what he brings to the table is a fresh look at DOD, and to try to recalibrate it so that not only does it get rid of this excess generals, but it also makes it more efficient. For example, one of the problems that the U.S. military had in the last few years was recruitment. And the recruitment was, according to the Republican Party, went down because of the promotion of critical race theory and diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so he intends to get rid of it, and anyone who continues to promote it.
He also opposes women in combat roles, though.
Yeah, that's right, he does, and we'll see what happens with that. I mean, there might be some compromise areas that he can operate in, but and don't forget, he is a combat veteran. He's not some guy who lived in an ivory tower and postulated something. So he has some ideas that maybe some people might not like, but I think he's also committed to making sure, 70% of the military in the U.S. are white males, and if you try to push away the people that want to fight or are willing to give their lives for it, then you can't fill it with people who are diverse, because the people who are diverse aren't volunteering to go in the military. So I think I think what he'll do is he'll recalibrate the DoD, and he'll have lots of good advice. And don't forget, we mentioned Mike Waltz was a previous advisor to the Pentagon chief, so he could also help Pete Hegseth with what's going on in the Pentagon. I'm not concerned about it. The other thing I think is real important to remember about Hegseth is that he ran 2 veterans NGOs also prior to his nomination, and those NGOs focus on helping veterans. So he's very close to the output of war. In other words, he's not going to be the one who's going to be pushing for war. And that's another complaint he has about DoD, is that there's this cycle of general officers going straight to corporate America and helping them sell weapons and causing the cost of weapons to go up, and this monopoly that the 5 or so major defense companies have on the U.S. government.
Bearing all that in mind, Alex, so he has, as have mostly all the cabinet, Trump's cabinet appointees, have this mandate that Trump has given them, essentially to transform or gut and transform their institutions. My question would be, and this obviously has been raised in the U.S. media, is would somebody who has felt victimized, who the U.S. media says hold a grudge, is that kind of person the best person to be transforming the institution?
I think DoD probably is the largest federal agency with more than 1 million people to manage, and the United States forces is deployed around the world. And with such a huge organization with great tradition, any innovation, reorganization, or overhaul is gonna take a lot of patience, and you have to look at all the regulations and rules. And more importantly, when you do serious reorganization or overhaul, these troops cannot be involved in major wars, because it's not drinking the Chinese herb medicine, it's going into an operation room to get a surgery. And so I think Pete's main task is to balance the idea to reform and also the morals and the readiness of American troops around the world.
Yeah, so it sounds like it would be a huge task for him. Now, Hegseth has said that the PLA, the Chinese military, is committed to defeating the US. He says the US military is 10 years behind. Here's him talking about the two militaries and their comparisons. Take a look.
China's building an army specifically dedicated to defeating the United States of America. That is their strategic outset. Take hypersonic missiles. So if our whole power projection platform is aircraft carriers and the ability to project power that way strategically around the globe. And yeah, we have a nuclear triad and all of that, but a big part of it. And if 15 hypersonic missiles can take out our 10 aircraft carriers in the first 20 minutes of a conflict, what does that look like?
Guermantes, so I saw you obviously disagreeing with the question about his personal motivation, and maybe you would argue that it requires somebody just like him in order to transform these institutions. How much do you think that he can achieve in 4 years, and will it be fast enough in terms of China?
Well, first of all, someone has to start. And the current administration wasn't really excited about starting that, and the funding for defense has been going down quite a bit for the last few years. So I think that it has to start. President-elect Trump has nominated firebrands, people who are going to take charge of their organization and transform them. This was similarly accomplished during Franklin Delano Roosevelt's time, when we faced the Depression and faced World War II. So I think it's better sooner than later. Whether he's successful in making it happen in 4 years, I think it's like a first step. And I think people after him will follow up and continue, hopefully, in the same direction.
Do you think he has sufficient experience? Because that's one of the, the critiques of him for a senior high-level position.
Well, I would just point out that President Ronald Reagan was an actor, and he chose the right people to help him manage the country. He was also a governor of California. But it doesn't matter, your experience is part of it, but also your ability to choose the right people to surround you is also incredibly important. In the case of DOD, I think the Republicans are going to help make sure that whether or not he's nominated and sits in position, the people that will be working in the Pentagon will be people that will head the Pentagon in the direction that it needs to go.
Right. Okay. Alex, let's move to the final question. Trump has also nominated Tulsi Gabbard, who has criticized Biden administration engagements abroad, and she will serve, as he hopes, as the Director of National Intelligence, if confirmed. Take a look at her training in this video. Gabbard was the first Hindu elected to the House of Representatives in 2012. She's a combat veteran who served in Iraq and is currently a lieutenant colonel in the Army Reserve. She has criticized Joe Biden for taking the U.S., quote, closer to the brink of nuclear war than we ever have been before. And she stated that about Trump, I am confident that his first task will be to walk us back from the brink of war. The former Democratic congresswoman from Hawaii shifted her political allegiance, going from a candidate for the Democratic presidential nomination in 2020 to a Trump supporter in 2024. And if confirmed for the role, Gabbard would oversee all 18 of the nation's intelligence agencies. Alex, again, there's some reservations about her nomination. Why is that?
Well, some critics focusing on all the nominees and try to check their backgrounds, their previous experience with a specific assignment or nomination. I think if you read her, credentials, she did, have a lot of, opportunities to learn from, and she's not a stranger. She grew up from a political family, and I think her own experience tells me that she's a kind of person that would be very cautious of overcommitment overseas. But I think my gut feeling is that her main job is to deal with the intel community. The intelligence community will be reformed, and 18 of them with all different functions and missions. It would be a very important position and task for her to have a well-balanced and well-grouped and connected reform and make sure all the steps can help each other. And that's a very challenging job.
Right. And Guermantes, I think Alex is hinting again, obviously, at this sort of upheaval that's required, the sort of seismic or a revolution that Trump wants to effect in Washington. What do you think she brings to that role? Well,
again, just like the previous nominees we talked about, and Marco Rubio is going to be Secretary of State, hopefully, she wrote a book called For the Love of Country, and she really is a patriot, and she switched parties because she found the Democratic Party such as very corrupt, and she calls out the Clintons, Obama, and Biden for the corruption. In her book, she talks about the Hunter laptop and how 51 senior intelligence officials said it was a Russian plot to make Biden look bad. And it was proven that it wasn't a Russian plot. It was Hunter Biden leaving his laptop in some store and then somebody finding it and discovering all this information on it, which was true information. And so what she calls out is these 50 former senior intelligence officials who who claimed that it was a Russian hoax. I mean, a Russian attempt to make Biden look bad. So I think.
How about her defense of sort of Middle East dictators meeting with Bashar al-Assad?
Yeah, I think, again, too, if you look at what happened, she had a meeting, and then later on, she called him a dictator and a brutal murderer. So, she, like Alex said, she's evolving, and she's learning about different things, and, everyone says things when they're younger, and then later they change their mind. It's not permanent that if you have to be permanently perfect your entire life. So I think that she's got the right idea to reform the intelligence community, and I think also she also doesn't like the fact that during the war on terrorism, during the Obama administration, they failed to identify the enemy, which is Islamic radicalism. She wants to get rid of the corruption that exists in the intelligence community. Of course, everyone denies it, and make the intelligence community be more transparent as much as it can, but also be truthful to whoever is in charge of the government.
We're going to have to end it there. Thank you so much, Guermantes, Lailari and Alexander Huang, for joining Taiwan Talks today. If you liked our show, please search for us on YouTube, give us a thumbs up and hit subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching the show today. Stay safe and see you next time.
In the face of adversity, the power of truth.
A roadmap for a just and open world, charted by the freest country in Asia.
Taipei for Taiwan Plus.
Taiwan Plus News, a voice of freedom in Asia.